video for the Intro to Exchange Server 2010 training series. In this video, we're going to give you a little background about your instructor, J. Peter Bruzzese. That's me, by the way. We'll explain the mantra behind train signal instruction, the methodology behind our success, and then we'll introduce you to the road ahead, that is, the hardware and software that you'll need if you want to follow along at home or work, the personal prerequisites you should already have under your belt before jumping headfirst into messaging, and the topics we will cover in this introduction series. Then I'll wrap things up with some final words of encouragement. Okay, so to start with, who is J. Peter Bruzzese? Well, I'm a triple MCSC. That means that I'm certified in NT4, Server 2000, and Server 2003. I've taken more tests than you can imagine over the years. I'm also an MCITP for Exchange 2007, which stands for Microsoft Certified IT Professional, and that's for Enterprise Messaging with Exchange 2007. And I'm an MCTS, which is Microsoft Certified Technology Specialist for Exchange 2010. The only reason I'm not an MCITP for Exchange 2010 is because the exams haven't been released just yet for that certification at the time of these videos being created. Now you can see I have a list of other acronyms from other exams that I've taken, A+, Network+, INET+, and so on. But the last one, the MCT, stands for Microsoft Certified Trainer, and it isn't something you obtain by passing an exam, but rather it's something you work towards. Now for myself, training has always been a passion of mine. I've been a Microsoft Certified Trainer for over 10 years, and I just love it. I love the look that you see in a person's eyes when you're explaining something like TCP/IP, and all of a sudden, you can see that moment when it clicks, when they get it. There's nothing better than that feeling. Now, over the years, I've worked for a variety of companies like Goldman Sachs, Solomon Smith Barney, Merrill Lynch, and a host of others like New Horizons and even Microsoft. That work experience led to eventually writing a few magazine articles and then to a book deal, and now I have over a dozen titles to my credit which have been sold internationally in over 8 languages. I write articles both in print and online for Redmond Magazine, Windows IT Pro, Real Time, and Tech Target. I've written for Cybex, Q, and SAMS, with my Exchange 2007 how-to book being one of my favorite books to date, because Exchange is the subject that I'm most inspired by. And I'm the Enterprise Windows columnist for InfoWorld, as well as a conference speaker for Tech Mentor, Connections, and other venues. As you can see, I wear many hats. Ultimately, what I'm trying to convey to you here as the student is a sense of security. I want you to be secure in the knowledge that you are in good hands with me, that I love teaching, love Exchange, and can put those two loves together to provide you with the best Exchange training on the planet. That's one of the reasons I'm with TrainSignal. They believe in the same approach to video instruction that I've been working on personally for several years. A relaxed yet informative approach. The idea is to provide you with scenario-based instruction so that you feel like we're accomplishing goals through the series, not just learning facts or steps. Becoming a messaging specialist is somewhat of an art, and to be a true artist, you cannot just learn to paint by numbers, but you have to be immersed in what you're doing. That is how scenario-based instruction works. First, we're going to look into a company called Globomantics and consider the design and deployment strategy for them. And then we will implement the features required, while still planning ahead for future features they may need eventually. So in reality, we're teacher-student, but in our journey here in the scenario, let's consider ourselves colleagues on a team together. I'll be the experienced team lead for messaging, and you can be the new hire for our team. Being that I cannot see you and each student will have different skills, I may explain some topics you already know, which is okay because you may learn something new hearing it from a different point of view. And at times I may mention something that I assume you know already, but perhaps you don't. And being that you cannot stop me and say, hey, can you explain that? You can always pause the video, go look up the information, and jump back into the video, which is not something you can do in real life. On a real job, you would have to either fake it or say, I don't have the slightest clue what you're talking about. So that's another one of the benefits to video instruction. Now for the course itself. You may want to follow along at home or work in a lab environment, keep in mind that you will need the following hardware and software prerequisites. So in terms of hardware, you'll need an x64-based computer, and that's because Exchange 2010 only runs on 64-bit. Even if you plan on virtualizing your Exchange environment, you're still going to need that 64-bit architecture. You'll need roughly 2 to 4 gigabytes of RAM, and the reason we say roughly is because depending on how large you want to grow out your lab environment, how many roles you want to install and so forth, you may want more RAM than this. This is just the bare minimum. If you wish to implement high availability, you'll need to prepare for 2 mailbox servers with a third file share witness server, which should be a hub transport server. It's recommended that it be a hub transport server, so you may be installing up to 3 Exchange servers if you really want to mimic closely what you see here in the videos. And these can all be virtual systems if you like, so you might just have one physical system and you would install 2 or 3 additional virtual systems on top of it. Now if you wish to include an edge transport server, you'll require a separate physical or virtualized server that is not part of the Active Directory domain that you create. And that's because the edge transport server, as you'll soon learn, is not part of the Active Directory and it cannot be installed in conjunction with the other roles. Now as far as software is concerned, you're going to need Server 2008 or Server 2008 R2. You're going to want to have a copy of Exchange 2010 RTM that's released to manufacturer. There are additional downloadable requirements that you get from Microsoft for free, and depending on whether or not you have Server 2008 or Server 2008 R2, that will determine which downloadable requirements you need. And then depending on your preference, you may want to implement a VM solution. So you may want to go with something more high-end like Hyper-V or ESX, or you may want a desktop VM solution like Virtual PC or VMware's Workstation. Now as far as personal prerequisites, some folks wonder what kind of prerequisites in terms of knowledge should they have in place personally before learning messaging, and it really does vary from person to person. Between what you've learned, what you've read, what you've experienced, there's no one way to get ready for messaging, but there are a few foundation elements that you might want to have under your belt. So for example, an advanced level of experience with networking. Obviously, you should know how computers connect together, how routing works, how TCP/IP works. All of that is connected to understanding messaging, especially in the event there's a problem and you need to trace where that problem is coming from. You should also have a working understanding of Active Directory. That includes both the logical and physical structure. So you should understand the concept of domains, organizational units, sites, and then when it comes to the physical structure, you should understand site replication, site links, and so forth. You should have a comfortability with server itself, and even though we're focusing on Server 2008 or Server 2008 R2, you can consider your knowledge with Server 2000 or 2003, that experience, to be sufficient. And that's because even though we're dealing with different server versions, for the most part, if you're already comfortable with 2000 and 2003, you'll be able to pick up 2008 as we go through this. The majority of our time is not really spent with server, but with Exchange. Now it's not a necessity, but it certainly would be helpful if you have a modicum amount of experience with messaging. It will help you to feel more comfortable. Now this doesn't necessarily mean Exchange experience, but really any form of messaging platform, whether it be Lotus or some other platform that has given you experience with messaging, that will come in handy for you. But if you don't have any experience, don't worry at all. We're going to make everything that we talk about here easy to digest even for beginners. Now keeping in mind that this is the introduction series, the topics we will cover include the following: the evolution of Exchange over 15 years, installing Exchange 2010, Exchange management tools, which include the Exchange Management Console and the Exchange Management Shell, mailbox overview and configuration, server roles overview, unified messaging in Exchange 2010, working with public folders, high availability and database availability groups, which is personally one of my favorite subjects, and transitioning from Exchange 2003 or 2007 over to Exchange 2010. Okay, so are you ready to begin? Wonderful. Now, just in case you're a little apprehensive as to what you're getting yourself into, keep in mind a few things. First of all, the Exchange community and Exchange team are wonderful and always willing to share knowledge with others. So by entering the world of Exchange, you are becoming part of a wonderful community. Exchange is ever evolving, and whether this is your first step into the world of Exchange or your 100th, we are all on the same path and moving in the same direction, toward the ultimate messaging platform. Last but not least, I hope you enjoy this Introduction to Exchange 2010 training course. And I'll see you in the next lesson.